Gendered social processes linked to space, place, and scale have been recognized as an important tool that constructs the realities of Black women's lives, which does not manifest as an intrinsic system of choice, but rather highlights that it is enforced in the lifetime of women. In the urban context, these conditions are evident to be true among informal food traders in Johannesburg CBD. Various architectural elements contribute to how her place is negotiated in the city. She is often placed outside the parameters of precincts with permanent structures. These elements define her value and position in the hierarchical ladder of the economy. The myth of violence I'm exploring is cultural training supports the rite of passage towards womanhood, and the violence inflicted is authoritarian cultural. Similarly, the project inquires on the rural context and maps architecture's complicity in the social classification of Black women's identities by tracing how it aids in subjugating Xhosa women at the weekly reed dance. It takes you on a journey of uManyuswa, a 28-year-old woman in search of her own identity. She is rendered a social object of scrutiny through different cultural methods of practice of food preparation, from which ingredients and tools she uses to how she plates the food. The reed dance, also known as Mdiya, that takes place at the village traditional house. It is designed as a training camp that perpetuates gender roles and positions the rural kitchen as an insidious trading ground of compliance. The project proposes a camp at the traditional house that introduces new methods of rearranging architecture to trouble patriarchal systems embedded in cultural space. The site of inquiry is a village called eMantlaneni in the Eastern Cape. The traditional house lies in isolation of all the houses in the village. The kraal. This space in the traditional house is the main part of the homestead, a space for ritual observation, for measuring wealth of a family, and a space for defensive positioning. It is also men's popular social space, which in many plots is a place near the traditional house. They are always glued to their chairs and observing what uManyuswa does. I'm using a cookbook as a narrative framing device for my portfolio. The logic of the cookbook is a chronological representation of the process that Xhosa women undergo at the traditional reed dance, from the moment she enters the premises to when she leaves. The ritual practices are 1. Cleansing, 2. Cooking, 3. Plating, and 4. Etiquette. The traditional house. Number 1. Before Mdiya commences, she says her final words and bids farewell to her true self. Number 2. This is where she enters the grounds of compliance and transitions to be instructed. The gate is small, so she awaits her turn to enter, anticipating what is to come. Number 3. She waits in obedience before the proceedings of Mdiya commence. Then it all starts. Number 4. Being taught how to speak, what to wear, and how to cook, or in service of figures of authority. Number 5. She moves to the kitchen, a training ground of compliance, where she practices all she has been taught. All this takes place over the watch of men that sit by the kraal, older women that watch over as she practices, and the all-seeing eye. Mdiya reimagined. The camp will consist of 4 ritual practices that will be taught throughout 4 consecutive days. The camp moves from being a training center to one that teaches women to reclaim their identity. The intent is to challenge and subvert Xhosa cultural methods of practice that were established by women and later changed by figures of authority. Day 1, Ritual 1, Cleansing. The practice of ukusinda, which is cleansing, is one that she established, which denotes ideas of constant recreation of space that lies in the ingredients. She has been placed in the kitchen, and she found ways of adaptation to make it feel like her own, and ukusinda was one of them, which was over time reconfigured. The activity will be practiced starting from the entrance, ending at the center of the space, which completely goes against how it's meant to be done. She will use horse dung and water at a ratio of 5:1 respectively. Day 2, Ritual 2, Cooking. The ancestral ritual that takes place when cooking is a practice that was established by women as a way of their resistance against gender roles in the early 1900s. This ritual was never performed in public because of the spatial conditions, but at the camp, it will still be practiced with all women as a way of communicating with their ancestors. She will dance and sing and chant and call upon those that made her to give her guidance and assurance of all that she does. Day 3, Ritual 3, Plating. This ritual becomes a new representation of reclaiming Black womanhood as a framework that highlights how women possess the power of what people eat. She was conditioned to plate more for the breadwinner and less for herself, but now she'll plate protein first at a larger portion, then starch at a smaller portion for herself. Day 4, Ritual 4, Etiquette. Cultural etiquette has been a tool used against her to control what she says, what she wears, and how she conducts herself. On Day 4, she has the freedom to go against these standards in an attempt to change the values of application where forms of misogyny appear in the space. Number 1. She no longer has to change and become someone she's not because she is in full control. Number 2. The gates are much wider than before, meaning she no longer anticipates what is to come but is exposed to it before she can enter. Number 3. She regains her womanhood and carries out all the practices free from misogyny. Mimicry is a communication tool used to create and regulate social interactions as a means to show others that you understand them. The chameleon effect refers to non-conscious mimicry of the postures, mannerisms, and facial expressions such that another's behavior passively and unintentionally changes to match that of others in one's social environment. Using the same principle on the camp, she'll be performing and have men observe through openings since they've been so programmed to be observers. These openings change according to the type of posture they want them to imitate, which they end up doing unintentionally. This is one way of changing how the figures of authority have been conditioned to have a certain relationship with instruction and a way of her to reclaim her identity. Thank you.